Welcome to our Line Opinion panelists for the week. We're happy to be joined in studio by attorney Sophie Martin, one of our regulars. Across the table, Sean Griswold. He is editor at Source, New Mexico. And Democratic former state senator Dee Dee Feldman is with us as well. Thank you all for being here. Now, our first topic today takes us to the movies as Americans packed the theaters last week for the premiere of Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. Now, the 3-hour max biopic follows the life of the physicist as he theorizes, creates, and questions the moral and fatal impact of the atomic bomb. Now, Sean, you saw the film. What will viewers living, let's say, outside the state learn about New Mexico from this film? Is this sort of a summation of where we were during the wartime effort?
You know, I don't think you're going to learn a lot about New Mexico from this film. New Mexico is a setting, it's a backdrop, it's kind of just there. Now, it does create this impression, you know, from a film perspective, and the narrative that Nolan put together is that Oppenheimer cared for New Mexico. There's a moment in the film where he talks about how he wants to design the lab there after understanding sort of the scientific advancements he just understood that could potentially create the atomic bomb that happened. And there's a scene in the movie where he's like, there's two things that I care about in life, and I'm paraphrasing here, is I love New Mexico and I love science, and I want to combine them at some point.
Interesting.
And so it doesn't really quite go into too much detail as to what his true passion was for New Mexico, why he felt New Mexico needed to be the place, other than perhaps just having a home here and just enjoying some of the mountain landscapes of northern New Mexico, which is a beautiful place. We all know and have fallen in love with it. But yeah, New Mexico, you're not going to get a lot of New Mexico. It's a backdrop. That's all it is.
Wow.
And it's very obvious that that's also part of a lot of, as we've seen in later years, even the general mission from the United States government in terms of what New Mexico's response is to nuclear development technology going forward. We're still barely considered.
Interesting point, that last point there. We have to come back and circle on that. Dee Dee, I want you to do a little show and tell here again on the desk. In '79, you wrote an 8-part series for the Albuquerque Journal called, quote, How Safe is New Mexico's Atomic City? If you could hold that up for the camera, that'd be really cool. And it's really kind of an interesting deal. 79 was a long time ago. I mean, that was a few full moons ago. What's changed in your reporting since, or have things gotten markedly better, worse, the same?
Well, the way people look at Los Alamos is different now than the way they did, of course, during the Manhattan Project. There's not as much secrecy. There's not as much paranoia on the part of the people who live there, and we have come to sort of idealize in New Mexico the high income, the great education system, the
More PhDs than any other town in America.
So New Mexico has become very dependent on this image of us as a brilliant community located in Los Alamos, Sandia, and you know, our congressional delegation, for example, dares not challenge the jobs and the federal dollars that come into New Mexico for this. But you know, since the atomic bomb was detonated, 70 some years ago, they're still disposing of waste. They're still making plutonium triggers. They're still trying to figure out what to do with the gaseous wastes that have tritium in it. And the state of New Mexico, you know, is really pretty small potatoes compared to the lab and the resources that the lab has. And yet the state of New Mexico is tasked with overseeing and keeping the people of New Mexico safe. That's, you know, I agree with Sean. The context, the New Mexico context, except for the pretty pictures, was kind of left out of that story. And we have our own collateral damage here.
Let's talk about that. Downwinders. That's the big one so far that folks are feeling like got left out of the narrative that Dee Dee was mentioning, Sophie. We're familiar with downwinders, those who live in the area of Trinity test site exposed to unsafe levels of radiation with the wind after the explosion. Interesting point, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act is set to expire next year. That's an amazing thing. We haven't caught up with what Dee Dee mentioned, the problems, the legacy problems. Why are we not getting more traction on this and taking care of our own here, basically?
Well, I think that's a really good point. You know, partway through what you were describing, I wanted to mention, you know, as the buildup for the Oppenheimer movie was happening and we were hearing more and more about it, the number of searches online for "is Oppenheimer real?" started to shoot up. Like questions across the country about like, did this really happen? I'm not sure. When you say we know about the downwinders, I'm not even really sure that a majority of New Mexicans know the story. It is ancient history for some people, right? The fact that the act is going to expire, but also the fact that many New Mexicans are not eligible for compensation of any sort is a real travesty. And I do see our Congress people trying to address the senators, et cetera.
Opportunity, possibly. Let's to push the ball forward here. Yeah.
So I love that you use that word because in my mind, you know, Christopher Nolan made the decision that he was going to build his story in a particular way, right? And I really appreciate that there was an attempt on the part of some of the downwinders to try and get that story in front of him. It doesn't sound like it was particularly successful, and he had his story in mind. So this opportunity now, the fact that this film is huge this summer, I'm sure it will be all over the Oscars. There is an opportunity for education. I was so impressed with the group that put together trailers essentially to go in front of certain screenings here in New Mexico. The conversation that's happening, the opportunity to educate not just New Mexicans but the country about the downwinder situation, the physical and economic impacts of being just even outside the blast zone that at the time they thought was dangerous. And now we know there was danger on a much larger scale for many more people.
That's right. Interesting. Sophie mentioned, Sean, the 15-second ad the Union of Concerned Scientists have in front of the film. How did you? I don't know. Were you on time for the film? I don't know if you saw that or not. I shouldn't. Right. You might have walked in, but the film was a minute long. Who knows? That's the way I do it. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
Did you happen to catch that ad when you went to go see it?
Okay, so I did see the movie at a theater here in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
I got there as the previews had already started,
Gotcha.
so there were about 3 or 4 previews before the film started. I did not see that ad. I was aware that it happened. So I wasn't sure if it aired before or if it even aired as part of this theater's thing.
Right.
But we did have a reporter named Kelsey Atherton. They're actually they're Albuquerque-based journalist, one of the prominent defense journalists, as well as nuclear defense systems journalists in the country. And so Kelsey, he reviewed the film at a panel that was put together by people who are supportive of that message, some of them who were involved in the message that also included downwinders, people who survived the atomic blast. And after they all watched the film, there was an overall discussion that brought up a lot of what I was talking about earlier about how New Mexico is not present in the film. And what we heard, not only just the absence of downwinders, there was people who are now adults who had family members who saw the atomic blast at Trinity site, who weren't alerted, who thought the world was over and ending there. Like we have quotes from people that are saying, my grandparents got on their hands and knees and started praying because they watched what is the pinnacle moment of this Christopher Nolan movie, which is the Trinity blast site. And there's no mention of that. There's also no mention of, and I mean, there's a conversation about how Oppenheimer and the U.S. government built Los Alamos, built a town. And there's no mention of the people who were local Hispanics, Native people, who were the people who built the roads, built the houses, did child care, did all of the manual labor that made Los Alamos what it is now. There's no mention of that. They're not even background actors, really, entirely in all of it. So it leads to that idea that New Mexico is just a setting. It's an invisible place. On top of that, you don't even see or even hear much of the conversation in the film about how uranium was even extracted. There's no conversation about New Mexico extraction here. There's one mention about something in Oak Flats, which I believe is in Tennessee, and it's one quick line. And that's basically it. Whereas the race to get enough of the raw mineral to raw material to build this bomb is kind of just another prop itself, without actually discussing how it happened.
That's unfortunate.
And real quickly to the point of compensation for downwinders, Danielle Prokop is a reporter with Source New Mexico who also has been following a lot of the nuclear defense systems and nuclear waste technology or nuclear waste storage that we have here in New Mexico, because it's an international business. we've evolved from the Manhattan Project to becoming the world's dumping ground for nuclear waste in New Mexico. And local communities in southern New Mexico are actually inviting it. They want it. This is, we've talked about before. It's economic development in the billions of dollars, you know? And so speaking with Danielle ahead of this this conversation in our taping, we actually got some insight into what Senator Ben Ray Lujan is trying to do to continue to advance the RICA compensation bill. We're being told that currently he's going to be trying to move that into the Defense Budget Act. And then if that were to happen, that's going to be their way to get that in there to provide some additional funding. We're not sure exactly on details as to how long that funding will be. But then, of course, that's all then going to become under the review of, Congress as it negotiates a potential government shutdown. So while this is one effort to slip it in, and that may not even be the best term, this is one effort to kind of get this appropriation available so people can continue to get money, it's still going to have layers of politics that could potentially stop it.
He knows that bill's going to get voted on. So if he's in, right? If it's in, great. If it's not, I mean, I think, not to, I'm in no way disagreeing with you. It's like, I think it could also be viewed as like a concession piece if there's not enough support within Congress for it, and
his hope
we
is
can't
that
afford it.
Yeah, and his hope is that Republicans have already approved a budget on the defense budget, which controls the House, and so the Senate would just send it back for reconsideration. And he feels as if this is the best way to do that.
Interesting. Dee Dee, let's pick up on where Sean was at here. This legacy we have here in New Mexico. The list, radiation, nuclear energy, toxic waste, WIP, ongoing work at Los Alamos, you reported on in the 70s. Does a mainstream movie like Oppenheimer just reinforce this idea that New Mexico is open for any and all business related to nuclear destruction and waste? Is this the overall takeaway if you're living in Maine and Minnesota and Iowa and other places?
It could be.
Yeah.
I think it could be. And the irony is even compounded for me by the fact that the nuclear bomb that was detonated, it's like a firecracker compared to what they are building now and what they are talking about as tactical nuclear weapons now. And in the 80s and the 70s, there was a pretty strong anti-nuclear movement nationwide. You remember the Silkwood film at that time?
Absolutely.
New Mexico was not a part of that anti-nuclear movement, except for a few of us, and we went in the opposite direction. And the result is, what you saw with uranium mining. And the damage that caused, and it was only an economic downturn that really, stopped our participation in the front end of the nuclear cycle. We still have the rear end of the nuclear cycle, the disposal, which many New Mexicans feel like we sort of started this. So we owe it to the nation to dispose of this, at least the defense waste. So it's been a devil's bargain all the way along, and I think the people of New Mexico are coming up on the short end.
Yep. Have to stop there. Thanks to our line opinion panel. We'll meet back here at the table in about 15 to talk through the not guilty verdict in the embezzlement trial against a former UNM athletic director. But first, an interview with a woman who's lived through the horrors left behind after the Trinity test. Tina Cordova is the founder of the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium. She's been working for years to earn recognition, as you heard at the table here, and compensation from the federal government. New Mexico in Focus correspondent Russell Contreras sat down with Ms. Cordova this week to ask about being overlooked yet again.